What's up, everybody? Eternal Fire here, and today we're going to be talking about the Brewmaster Monk in patch 7.2.5. Now, we're going to take a close look at a lot of the core abilities, as a lot of them have been tweaked or changed completely. We're also going to be looking at the stat priorities, the talents, and the rotation for the Brewmaster Monk. With that said, let's take a look. Before we start, though, I want to mention the two new legendaries added to the Brewmaster Monk, and one is the Storm Stout's Last Gasp, and it basically just gives you an additional charge of Keg Smash, and it increases the damage it does by 25%. So this is a really good legendary to have if you're just looking to put out more damage. You know, you're doing content that you don't need other more ideal survivability legendaries for. So this is a really nice DPS increase, but that's all it really gives you. Going down to Soul of the Grandmaster, for the Brewmaster Monk, it gives you Mystic Vitality. So this is your class ring, gives you Mystic Vitality. So if you look at your talents just quickly, you would get this Mystic Vitality. Stagger is 40% more effective against magical attacks. So you get that by default by wearing the ring, so that allows you to use either Healing Elixir or Dampen Harm with Mystic Vitality. So that's a pretty nice ring to consider using. Okay, so we're going to be taking a quick look at this spell book. We're not going to be talking about talents because we'll be covering that later on. First, you have Blackout Strike. It's on a 3-second cooldown. It's not affected by haste, and you strike with a blast of energy, dealing physical damage and generating a stack of Elusive Brawler. So before we get any further, let's explain Elusive Brawler. Elusive Brawler is what your mastery is. Each time you are hit by a melee attack or hit by a blackout or hit with Blackout Strike or Breath of Fire, you gain stacking 23% increased dodge chance until your next successful dodge. So when you're hit by a melee attack or you do Blackout Strike or Breath of Fire, you're going to gain all this extra dodge until you dodge, and then their stacks fall off and you reset. It also increases your attack power. But that's what Elusive Brawler is. Every time you get hit, every time you use those two abilities, you gain this stack of dodge until you dodge. In Tomb of Sargeras, that's actually going to be really, really nice because most of the boss fights are physical damage. A good majority of them anyway. So Blackout Strike gives you a stack of Elusive Brawler, which is really nice, and that's new to 7.2.5. The same thing with Breath of Fire. It gives you a stack of Elusive Brawler. You breathe fire on the target in front of you, causing fire damage and generating a stack of Elusive Brawler. Targets affected by Keg Smash will also burn for fire damage over 16 seconds. So you always want to use Fire Breath when Keg Smash debuff is up on your target. So let's just cover that real quick since we're on the topic, and those two abilities coincide with each other. Smash a keg of brew on the target, dealing damage to all enemies within 8 yards and reducing their movement speed by 50% for 15 seconds. Reduces the remaining cooldown on your brews by 4 seconds. So when they get that debuff from Keg Smash, you use your Breath of Fire, and not only does fire damage initially to them, but puts a fire dot on them as well. Crackling Jade Lightning is just a ranged attack. Detox removes poison and disease from the target. A Fuse is a very weak heal that you can put on yourself. Expel Harm. So we'll come back to Expel Harm. Exploding Keg is your artifact, and we'll talk about this now. Hurls a flaming keg at the target location, dealing fire damage to nearby enemies and causing them to miss their melee attacks for the next 3 seconds. So this does some massive AoE damage. So you can either use this as a DPS ability for, you know, big AoE pulls, or you can use this to help survive. So, you know, if you're doing like a AoE pack in a Mythic Plus dungeon or something, or doing Score Pyron and you have all the ads and everybody just missed the shockwave, so you got a ton of ads, you can throw this down and it'll give you 3 seconds of breathing room because none of the mobs will hit you with their melee attacks for 3 seconds. So if you're really falling behind, it'll give the healers a chance to catch up and give you a little bit of breathing room to recover. So this can either be used for just a massive AoE damage ability, or you can use it for survivability benefits as well. Now looking at Fortifying Brew, this is your biggest survival cooldown. Turns your skin into stone for 15 seconds, increasing your current and maximum health by 20%, increasing the damage you delay with Stagger by an additional 10%, and reducing all damage you take by 20%. So that is your main survivability cooldown right there. It is on a 7-minute cooldown. There is one legendary. Let's see if I can find it. Firestone Walkers. Each time you hit with Breath of Fire, reduces the cooldown of Fortifying Brew by 2 seconds up to a stack a maximum of 6 seconds. So that can help you reduce the cooldown, but those overall are not really the most powerful legendaries. Moving on, we have Ironskin Brew. Now you have 2 brews, and we'll talk about those now. Ironskin Brew increases the damage you delay with stagger by an additional 35% for 8 seconds. Shares charges with Purifying Brew. You have a max of 13 charges, and I believe it's a 21-second recharge, but with haste, that is reduced. So Ironskin Brew, it increases the amount that you stagger by 35%. Let's look at Purifying Brew right now. Purifying Brew clears 45% of damage delayed with stagger. Again, shares charges with Ironskin Brew. You have 3 charges. Okay. Looked at Keg Smash. Leg Sweep is a talent. Paralysis is just a CC. Provoke is your taunt. Resuscitate, you bring back a teammate. Roll, short distance. Pretty straightforward. That's your interrupt. Tiger Palm. Attack with the palm of your hand, dealing damage. Reduces the remaining cooldown on your brews by 1 second. Transcendence. So this is an interesting ability, and I'll just show you what it is. You put Transcendence there, and you can see your spirit is right there. Then you can use Transcendence Transfer and swap back to that. I'll let you use your imagination as to the benefits of what types of situations where you want to get back somewhere ASAP, and you can just hit Transcendence Transfer. Zen Flight's a strange little ability where you can fly on a cloud. Zen Meditation is another survivability cooldown if used properly. Reduces all damage taken by 60% for 8 seconds. Moving, being hit by a melee attack, or taking another action will cancel this effect. So basically, this is best used when a boss is casting on you, and you know you're going to be taking damage at the end of his cast, or he's swinging up to hit you, because a melee attack will break it, but at least it'll take that initial hit, a lot of that initial hit away. So when that boss is casting that really big ability, you're about to take a lot of damage. You can use Zen Meditation and, just shrug off a lot of that damage. Now let's look at our passives. Brewmaster's Balance. Your armor is increased by 25%. This is a buff to the Brewmaster Monk from 725. It used to be 15%, but they kind of lowered stagger, the buffs you got from stagger from Ironskin Brew, and they just wanted to put in more passive armor to kind of take some of the importance off of stagger. So you just have more base armor now. Celestial Fortune, you have a chance equal to your critical strike chance to be healed for an additional 65% of the amount healed. So that's nice to have. That makes crit a little more valuable for us. And then Gift of the Ox. When you take damage, you have a chance to summon a healing sphere visible only to you. Moving through this healing sphere heals you for X amount of healing. This is a really, really big deal, and it's going to be a huge deal in Tomb of Sargeras. So Gift of the Ox, when you take damage, you got a random chance to have a little sphere spawn near you, and you run through it and you get healed. Now we're going to move back to what I said we're going to go back to. Expel Harm. Draws in the positive chi of your healing spheres and expels negative chi, damaging the nearest enemy for 10 seconds, 10% of the amount healed. So basically what that is let's say I have healing spheres around me, right? I can either manually step over them, or if they're kind of spread out and I don't want to have to move, I can just use Expel Harm, and that will draw all the orbs to me and just heal me for as many orbs that I have nearby. So say I have 4 orbs nearby, it'll heal me for the strength of all 4 of those orbs. So it's a really nice heal, but it does cost some chi or energy, 15 energy. And if you're starved for energy at that moment, it can be difficult, but if you're dying, I find it's worth it. It's a very nice heal to have. And it just it doesn't require you to have to be moving. So that is Gift of the Ox, and that is how it works with Expel Harm. We talked about Mastery, Elusive Brawler, in your stacks of dodge, and then Stagger. This is like the bread and butter of the Brewmaster Monk. Stagger. You shrug off attacks, delaying 40% of physical damage instead of taking it over 10 seconds. Affects magical attacks at 50% effectiveness. So basically, when you take a hit for 100,000 damage and you have, you use Stagger, so you take an initial instant 60% of that 100,000, you take 60,000 damage, and over the next 10 seconds, you take that 40 damage, that 40,000 damage as a dot for 10 seconds. So you only take 60% of the initial hit and you shrug off the other 40%. So this is why your brews are so important. So when you increase, when you use Iron Skin Brew with your stagger, 40% baseline stagger, and then you use Iron Skin Brew, that brings it up to 75%. I don't count very well, so I hope that number's right. Yeah, 75%. So now you're shrugging off 75% of that hit, and you're only taking 25,000 damage initially. Okay? So that's a really huge deal. So that is why Brewmaster Monks are so powerful, is because you're not taking those massive spiky hits that other tanks take and have to react to. You're just taking that damage slowly over time, which lets healers, get their hots rolling, get their heals going on you, and it gives you time to react as well. And then Purifying Brew, you'll see here on my bar, I have this black bar up here, and it starts to fill up when I'm taking stagger damage. And if I'm taking a ton of stagger damage, it goes from green to yellow to red. And red is like, you're taking a ton of that ticking dot stagger damage. And that's when you use Purifying Brew. So that clears 45% of that stagger damage as a dot. So it clears 45%, so it's just gone. The thing you have to remember is you want Iron Skin Brew up as much as you can, 100% of the time, which is very doable because you have Keg, Smash, and Tiger Palm always reducing the cooldown of your charges of your brews, okay? So you always want to have Iron Skin Brew up because that's going to just increase your stagger so much more. And then you want to use your Purifying Brew when you have so much stagger that you're taking a huge ticking damage from your stagger, and that's when you use your Purifying Brew to kind of stabilize your health bar. So always keep Iron Skin up, and always use Purify Brew when you're taking too much stagger damage. And that is basically all of the abilities for the Brewmaster Monk. I really wanted to go over the spell book because so much has changed. I wanted to make sure that, folks weren't missing anything. Looking at the stat priorities, what you want to do is basically get your haste to somewhere where you're comfortable with your brews coming up in time for you to keep Iron Skin Brew up and Purifying Brew. If you're taking Black Ox Brew, you really don't need that much haste. I have 18%, which is actually too much, but due to some of the upgrades that I've gotten, I kind of got stuck with it. The reason you don't want a lot of haste as a Brewmaster is because you just want your Iron Skin Brews or your brews to just be coming back up in a manageable fashion. And if you have too much haste, that just takes away from other valuable stats. So I would say the next one is versatility. Versatility is very nice to have for obvious reasons. It just reduces the damage that you take, the healing done, and damage done that you do. And then mastery is equally as good as versatility in the fact that it gives you attack power, and it really the dodging is really excellent. The way it stacks dodging, especially with Blackout Strike and Breath of Fire. In Tomb of Sargeras, it's just going to be it's going to be very nice to have that amount of dodge. And then crit is the final one. So that's just nice to increase your damage, but for survivability purposes, get your haste to a comfortable level for you personally, and then versatility and mastery followed by crit. And that's the stat priority for the Brewmaster. Okay, moving on to the talent section, you have in the first tier Chi Burst, Eye of the Tiger, and Chi Wave. Chi Burst is really excellent for AoE damage and some burst healing. Eye of the Tiger is good for sustained, small amount of damage over time sustained, and just healing on yourself. So Tiger Palm also applies Eye of the Tiger, dealing nature damage to the enemy and healing the monk over 8 seconds. And you're using Tiger Palm all the time. So you basically are always doing that small amount of damage over time and healing over time to yourself. I would use Chi Burst for big, AoE fights, or I like that talent for Mythic Plus too. It's also fun. It looks really cool. I'll show you. It's got a really cool graphic to it. Anyway, moving down to the next tier, Tiger's Lust is my preference. It's not tied to roll like Chi Torpedo is, and it just gives you a third option for mobility. Moving down, light brewing. If you're brand new to being a brewmaster, you might want to try light brewing first. It reduces the cooldown of iron skin brew and purifying brew by 3 seconds and increases their maximum charge by 1. So instead of having 3 charges, you would have 4, and they'd be 3 seconds less of a cooldown. Black Ox brew is something, it's a little more advanced. You chug it and it instantly gives you all of your charges back, and it refills your energy all the way. So that's really nice to have. It's what I use pretty much all the time. Gift of the Mists, it gives you a higher chance to trigger your healing spheres, but I find that it doesn't proc nearly as much as I would like it to. So I just roll with Black Ox Brew. That's pretty much my default. In the next tier, you just have some CC stuff, some crowd control. Summon Black Ox. It'll pulse threat to all enemies within 30 yards. It's something that you could, use on Necrotic, potentially, to drop your stacks. Leg Sweep is your default go-to. It's an AoE stun for 5 seconds. And then moving down, we have Healing Elixir, Mystic Vitality, and Dampen Harm. Mystic Vitality you should absolutely take against a high magic damage fight. Healing Elixir is really more something you'd want to use for, leveling or doing something relatively easy. But Mystic Vitality by far, like a fight like Star Augur into the Nighthold, you need to take Mystic Vitality to buff your stagger against magic damage. And then Dampen Harm is a really good talent to take for raid bosses. Reduces all damage you take by 20% to 50% for 10 seconds, with larger attacks being reduced by more. So this is a really great survivability cooldown that you can add in addition to your fortifying brew and your Zen meditation. And then we have Rushing Jade Wind, Invoke Nizua the Black Ox, and Special Delivery. Rushing Jade Wind is the most consistent AoE damage. It's the easiest to pick up trash mobs in a dungeon or on a boss fight with a lot of ads. Special Delivery is easier to use because it's passive. So every time you use your brews, it just gives you a 100% chance to throw a keg in the air, and after 3 seconds, you're going to deal some damage. This used to be a 30% chance to proc when you use your brews. Now it's 100% chance when you use your brews, but they just reduce the damage by 70%. So Rushing Jade Wind is your most consistent AoE ability, but you need to use it. You need to use it as a talent, whereas this is completely passive. Invoke Nizua. It summons Effigy of Nizu, the Black Ox, for 45 seconds and attacks your primary target and taunts it. And he also frequently stomps, damaging all nearby enemies. The only time I've used this expansion is on the Mage Tower. So I'm going to prefer this right now. This Special Delivery kind of seems weak, in my opinion. And with some of the breaks you have in the Brewmaster rotation, I really have no problem reapplying this. It doesn't interrupt my rotation very much, if at all. In the last tier, we have Elusive Dance, Blackout Combo, and High Tolerance. Elusive Dance, Purifying Brew now clears an additional 20% of damage delayed with stagger. It also grants up to 20 dodge and damage done for 6 seconds based on the level of stagger damage purified. Then we have High Tolerance. Stagger delays an additional 10% of incoming damage. You gain up to 15% haste based on your current level of stagger. So if you have a ton of stagger, it increases your haste, okay? Because it's up to 15% haste. It's not just automatically 15. It could be lower, but if you're at high, a massive amount of stagger, it's going to be 15% haste, which is going to lower your brew's recharge time faster. And then it also just increases your baseline stagger by 10%. So instead of being that 40%, now it's 50%. Let's see if it does this. Yeah, delay 50% of physical damage. So as you can see there, it just adds on to your baseline stagger 10%. That's very powerful. However, Blackout Combo is, in my opinion, the best talent to use in this tier, but also the most complicated talent to use in this tier. Blackout Strike empowers your next ability. When you use Tiger Palm, it just increases its damage. Breath of Fire If you use Blackout Strike and then Breath of Fire, it reduces the cooldown of Breath of Fire, which is great because Breath of Fire is a 15-second cooldown. Keg Smash reduces the remaining cooldown on your brews by 2 additional seconds, which is amazing. You always want to be reducing the time of your brews. Iron Skin Brew pauses stagger damage for 3 seconds, which just gives you some breathing room. Purifying Brew grants you a stack of your Elusive Brawler, which is your mastery. So when used correctly, Blackout Combo is an extremely effective talent to take. If you're looking for, if you're newer to Brewmaster, like light brewing, I would go with something like High Tolerance. It's going to help you with your haste, and it's also going to increase your passive stagger. So finally, for your rotation, the first thing to remember is to keep Iron Skin Brew up 100% of the time and use Purifying Brew to relieve the amount of stagger that you have if it's too high. You want to make sure that that's always on you, Iron Skin Brew. So for your rotation, what you want to make sure that you do is use Keg Smash on cooldown. Use Blackout Strike on cooldown. For single target, after Blackout Strike, use Tiger Palm. And then Breath of Fire and Rushing Jade Wind as a filler. Just make sure Keg Smash and Blackout Strike on cooldown. After Blackout Strike, followed by Tiger Palm, Breath of Fire, and Rushing Jade Wind as a filler. You can also use Exploding Keg as a filler. So what that might look like is Keg Smash, Blackout Strike, Tiger Palm, Breath of Fire. Blackout Strike, Tiger Palm, Rushing Jade Wind. Keg Smash, Blackout Strike, Tiger Palm. And then you can use your Explosive Keg, and then Keg Smash, Blackout Strike, Tiger Palm. And that's going to be your best way to do damage. Just remember, Keg Smash on cooldown, Blackout Strike on cooldown, followed by Tiger Palm, Breath of Fire, and Rushing Jade Wind as your fillers. It's very important that you do it in that order, because if you're doing single target DPS damage, you always want to make sure that Tiger Palm is after Blackout Strike, so it's always buffed. Because the thing you want to remember is you look at your artifact ability, Face Palm, Tiger Palm has a 40% chance to deal 300% of the normal damage. And then with your Blackout Combo that you've taken, because this is your greatest DPS increase talent, this is the only DPS increase, other than the fact that this gives you more haste, but that's not a significant factor. It increases your Tiger Palm when you use Tiger Palm after Blackout Combo or Blackout Strike by 200%. So that with your artifact trait make Tiger Palm a very powerful ability. So again, Keg Smash, Blackout Strike, Tiger Palm, Breath of Fire, Blackout Strike, Rushing Jade Wind, Keg Smash, and you're basically going to repeat that over and over and over and over. Agility is your number one stat, like I typed earlier, and so that's how you want to DPS single target. For AoE, what you want to do is use Keg Smash, Blackout Strike, Breath of Fire, because that reduces the cooldown of Breath of Fire, so you can use it more often, and then Rushing Jade Wind. So Tiger Palm for AoE takes a back seat to your other abilities, Keg Smash, and then Blackout Strike, and then Breath of Fire, and then Rushing Jade Wind, and Tiger Palm then becomes your filler. Whereas with single target, Breath of Fire and Rushing Jade Wind become your filler. And again, just make sure at the same time that you're keeping your brews up, or your Iron Skin Brew up, and then you're just relieving yourself with Purifying Brew. So that is a rotation for the Brewmaster, single target and AoE. It's very simple. That's really basic. So I hope you guys found that helpful. If you did like this video, leave a like, comment, subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I will see you on the next one.